Welcome back, my friends. It's great to see you. On this weekly report, I'm going to be talking about the Shincheonji Church, the leader of this church, and what the government is doing to stop this outbreak. So let's get started. Last week, I left off talking about how the South Korean citizens started a petition for the government to disband this church. At that moment, they had over 500,000 signatures. But a week later, now they have 1.2 million people in agreement on this petition. So now the government is taking this more seriously. They're investigating the church leader on seeing if he committed any crimes while he told his members to obstruct the quarantine efforts that the government has been implementing. Now, to give you a little more detail about this leader of this church, his name is Mr. Lee. He believes he is the second coming of Jesus Christ himself. And this church, Shincheonji, stands for New Heaven and Earth. And the belief is that Mr. Lee will lead 144 members into the new heaven. My take on this is 144,000 people. Like when you have a limit, it just smells like a scam, a cult. Back on topic. 2 days after this article talking about the investigation of this leader of this church, it comes out that Mr. Lee has made a televised press conference to apologize to the public on behalf of his members. Mr. Lee, who is 88, was on his knees pledging full support with the government to curb the outbreak. So after this televised press conference by Mr. Lee, people had noticed that he was wearing a special watch. And this watch that he wore had the name of former President Park. If you do not know who President Park is, here's some spark notes. She's the first female president of Korea. She got impeached and she was served a 25-year sentence in prison. The funny thing about this watch, though, is that it was gold. According to former Park administration, there were no gold presidential watches, only silver. So many people do not understand why he is wearing a gold watch with the president's name on it. There's conspiracy theories of ties of political parties and this church, and there's confusion of why he is wearing a gold fake presidential watch. So that is some drama that came from this televised press conference. It is just not going very well for this leader right now. Let's take a break from the church and the coronavirus, as North Korea made the headlines the other day. They shot off 2 projectiles into the East Sea. Now, the East Sea, if you do not know, is the body of water that separates Korea and Japan. Government officials have said that this was more about rallying their people than inciting any tension between countries. So North Korea is still alive and active, but we don't really hear much about them. So that wraps up the news for North Korea. These days there's a lot of talk about this church, but I think this is the best headline that I read all week. This talks about what the Korean government is doing to stop this outbreak, and this is great. So they proposed a new budget of 11.7 trillion won, which is $9.9 billion, to aid the country in multiple ways. So in a few ways, here are the top things that they're funding with this proposed budget. They are increasing the number of infection quarantine hospitals. 2, they are using some of this budget to help keep the current hospitals and facilities open that are just losing money. I think it is smart to keep supporting these places in a time of crisis. So the third thing that they're funding with this budget is to help the confirmed patients to stay quarantined long enough, kind of help them financially so there is no worry or no rush to get back to work. I think that's important to make sure everyone is healed, they completely get over this virus before going back to work and unfortunately probably spreading it. So I do like this idea as well. The fourth thing they're doing with this budget is to support the small businesses here in Korea. One of my favorite things about Korea is how many mom and pop shops there are here. However, in this time of crisis, no one's going out really. Even myself, I'm delivering food most of the time rather than eating at restaurants with my friends. So I understand the toll that has been taken on these small restaurants. So I'm thankful that the government's helping them out. And five, they are donating 7 million masks to the hotspots here in Korea. I think that's wonderful because trying to find a mask here, even in Seoul, it's impossible. And if you do find a mask, you're paying $5-6 for one. It's just absurd. On to our last story. Again, it's about the Shincheonji church leader. He had a wild ride. He's investigated for crimes. He apologizes. He gets scrutinized about his watch. And now, at the end of the week, his church tries to donate $12 billion to help prevent this outbreak. Now, this is the funniest part. The mayor of Daegu, where this money was donated to, he denies it. He says he does not want it. He wants the Shincheonji church is to just cooperate with the government. The Daegu mayor still thinks that the church members are still not cooperating fully with government officials. Oof, that's a rough week for the leader of this church. It just seems like he can't win. To end this week with my favorite quote from all the articles I read, it comes from a Shincheonji scholar and a religious studies professor. He is quoted to say, "The mask-wearing act and his admissions of getting a flu shot every year also certainly does not go with his claims of being the second coming of Jesus Christ." This professor just straight up roasted this poor man. He's 88. Be gentle. My thoughts on this week is there's a lot of countries that have banned any Koreans from traveling to their country, and I totally understand that. The only thing that I don't understand is Korea's testing so many people. I believe over 70,000 people have taken the test, but they were tested negative. It just shows you how much money is going into these tests, right? However, I also know some countries have completely stopped testing. So if a country stops testing, how do you know whether that is growing or if they don't have any of the infected people there? However, those countries aren't getting banned. What kind of nerves me about this is Korea's trying to do the right thing and they're getting punished, which I understand. But what about the other countries that aren't doing the right thing? They're just scot-free. But they're the ones that might be spreading it more. I think that's what bugs me is if you're going to ban travel, you should just stop travel everywhere if you really want to protect your people of your country. I know that financially probably is not possible, but if you just block one country, I just don't get it. Because if you read the news, it's growing rampant everywhere, but not a lot of places are testing. So that's what I don't get. I just don't understand that. So that's kind of my thoughts of this week. I hope you enjoyed this crazy week, and I look forward to seeing what happens next week. So thank you again for tuning in. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video.